This presentation, titled Audit Programs Preparing for eAuditing, comes to us from Shauna Wilson. Shauna has worked in quality for more than 30 years and holds ASQ's Quality Manager Certificate and Exemplar Global's Principal Auditor certification. Her research in virtual team communication and development of virtual auditing methods has made her the leading expert on the topic of eAuditing. She earned a master's degree in engineering focused on organizational performance technologies and instructional design. Shauna wrote Interteaming.com, Tools to Create High-Performance Remote Teams, and co-authored eAuditing Fundamentals, Virtual Communication, and Remote Auditing. She has been featured in Quality Progress, The Auditor Online, and ASTD's InfoLine. Shauna is the chair of the Portland ASQ section and served as a U.S. expert for ISO PC 302, which developed ISO 19011-2018 guidelines for auditing management systems. And with that, take it away, Shauna.
Oh, thank you, Michael. I just want to give a little bit of background as far as my experience with virtual auditing. And this started in 1997 when I started working with virtual teams and doing research with virtual teams in my studies, both in college and with companies that I was working with. By 2000, I was auditing companies, and I had one company that I had audited for 8 years and never set foot on that property and audited the whole time virtually with those companies. They, in turn, received 0 non-conformities from their registrars all through that time as well. So with that history and that knowledge of my experience in the early years for eAuditing, I want to go through and talk to you a little bit about how to prepare your audit program to get it set up for conducting e-audits or virtual audits. Part of our learning objectives today are with 2 fronts. What I want to do here is I want to incorporate and provide information as far as e-auditing into an existing audit program. And what that does is it requires planning for technology, planning for training of the auditors, and also the assessment of the audit performance. Audit programs preparing for e-auditing discusses the minimum criteria to expand your audit program. We want to focus on the audit program elements in this presentation today. That includes interested parties, the audit process, the technology that's required, auditor capabilities, and also the risk assessment of the audit program itself. In this presentation, I'm going to expand on these 4 areas, for example. One is the interested parties and their necessary agreements therein. The review of the management audit plan. I'm going to give you an example, and it's going to be out there for you, but let's just talk about it, especially with the new revision of ISO 9001. Also, learn to conduct a risk assessment of the audit program. I want to give you an example of what that may look like as well. And then also we'll end with discussing what the auditor's new capabilities are required to be able to run the technology, but then also to facilitate the online audit. So having said all of that, the 2 learning objectives include to define the necessary criteria that should be included in the audit program, and also provide examples for the planning to learn to do the e-audit in your audit program. So let's begin with definition. First of all, J.P. Russell, he had come out. He's been an author and a mentor, a leading role in the audit and audit arena and processes and defining the processes. And his definition was an audit is a systematic and independent and documented process for obtaining sufficient audit evidence and evaluating objectively to determine the extent in which the audit criteria are fulfilled. So if we take a look at just an audit itself, this is what we're trying to do. It needs to be a systematic and independent and documented process to gather information so that we know that information is credible and we can evaluate it against a standard or criteria. Okay? Now, an e-audit is that plus, or with the exception, is that we use electronic means to obtain the audit evidence in order to determine the extent of that conformity to the audit criteria. So it's the very same. We're going to use the same kind of process. We're going to use the evaluation process and all that. There's just that we're using technology to collect the data. A couple other definitions that you'll see, and I got this from ADNAP's definition, that is remote audit. This is what they're calling it, a facilitation of assessment from a location other than that being physically present. Okay? And the virtual site is an online environment allowing persons from different physical locations to execute processes. Those are the other two kinds of definitions, and we will see that all of these terms are used interchangeably. You know, we call it remote audits, we call it virtual audit. I'm calling it e-audit because we're very specific on what we want to gather here, and with the focus of the importance of process, having a system, and the importance of collecting evidence in a remote location using technology. So I'm going to use e-audit, but it may slip to remote or virtual, but I really mean the e-audit aspect of this. Now, when we look at an audit program, some of the elements that we want to ensure are there, and this is coming from the ISO 1911-2018 standard, including the technology for e-audits, because we've got that in there this time, is the audit process. So spelling out clearly what the audit process is. We'll go over some of that in a later slide. Also, what we want to do is we want to collect or to understand what the auditor capabilities are. So how, what is their experience? A lot of the auditors, especially with registrars, they've just been traveling all this time. They've been in airports when the virtual environment took their wings and it took off. And now we see it again coming up with this pandemic, where they're now grounded and having to do virtual audits or remote audits without the experience a lot of the people in virtual corporations have. So the auditor capability in this arena is very important. All right, the next one is that audit assessment and risk with the audit program. So we must assess the audit risk, and these are risks that the audit will not occur, or there's a chance that the audit evidence cannot be collected in a sufficient manner that you can now evaluate the adequacy to the quality management system. Very important to do that risk assessment. Of course, the technology is a big one here, and what we need to learn here, and of course there's going to be a slide that's going to go over a little more detail than what I'm going to say here, is that it's important that the technology be defined, what it is that you need to have to collect the data, and then to test it to ensure that it's going to work on the day that you're going to use it, and then also have what we call a visual review process that is verified, and the three of these things working together as a stable means to collect objective evidence. So this is very key to being able to do virtual audits on a production floor, for instance. And then finally, the last part is the interested parties agreement. So the agreement with the interested parties to use the eAuditing method. So here we have to really define who those interested parties are and to what extent is the agreements, what criteria is needed for agreement in this arena. So when we think about interested parties and that, the management audit planning matrix kind of gives us a leadway to what kinds of interested parties we're going to need in the scope of doing a complete audit planning for a company that's mostly supply chain, global supply chain, that type of company. And the kinds of participation from other types of managers in the company. So one of the really great things that ISO 9001 2015 came out with was reference to the management audit plan. Now, before the 9000 series came out, they always had a management representative that would oversee the audit and the audit plan and all of that. And it was really focused to the manufacturing floor. But if we really take a look at the bigger picture and what the authors of the 9001 was talking about by taking away that single management representative and now going to the management team for the responsibility of the quality management system, then that can expand essentially the management audit planning itself. So it's going to incorporate many other people. If you were to take a look at the entire quality management system and look at it for adequacy throughout the whole organization. So how you read this audit planning matrix is this. I've got the audit type and then the separate types of audit methods. So I'm calling this a hybrid audit model. It's going to incorporate many different tools for auditing or reviewing that can be at the use of the different groups also. It could be a quality department, it could be an engineering department or a procurement department, depending on who's responsible for what aspect of this. So we find this in corporations, we find this in business. We have these departments. The problem that we have is they're not synced together. And this will help pull it all together so that everybody's connected and everybody's using similar tools to find out if their quality management system is working correctly. So when we read this, the first line, we've got the conformance type. So this is going to be a conformance to like an ISO 9001 standard. And what we could have here is a face-to-face audit or an e-audit, or we can have a document review or desk audit, or we could take a look at metrics, performance metrics, which could be part of the audit trail as well, with the first three. So what I'm suggesting here with the face-to-face is that maybe the face-to-face tool is used in a hybrid rotation. So maybe in a 3-year period, you go boots on the ground at a location, but use the e-audit, the other two. So it could still, within that 3-year period, be every other year. E-audit, face-to-face, e-audit, face-to-face, or, that type of thing. Then the document review would be maybe a regular review of specific documents that you want to read, be it with the supply chain or other kinds of performance requirements. Now, to go down to the performance type of audit, this is where you're doing maybe customer survey and looking to see how the customer is thinking about your company and the product that you're providing or the service that you're providing. This could be done with document reviews, with surveys. It also could be done with undercover auditors, where they go and they pose their customers at service centers or at distribution places and find out what is being said about your product. Those kinds of activities can also occur. And this would be a face-to-face option. Risks and opportunities, we would then do both the undercover auditor on face-to-face, but do supply chain audits, undercover auditors, as I said, do a document review of the certificates or any protocol performance measures that are listed. And then the supplier audits, here we would have the same kinds of tools. We could have the face-to-face, or we could have the conformance to regulatory requirements, and doing that with an e-audit. And that procurement group could be doing that and not miss an audit because of budget cuts or other reasons that are outside their control. So there's a lot of different ways that we could take a look at the quality management system just using these different tools at our disposal, and they will all work for whatever we need them to do. The interested party in this audit program, we need to define who they are. Many times it's going to be a supplier, or many times it's going to be another contract manufacturer, or it's going to be a distributor or warehouse or somebody like that we're needing as partners to be successful in the products or services that we're providing. So those parties need to be listed, but then also they need to agree upon to conduct audits remotely. So a lot of these places don't allow for cameras, so you need to find that out. The other thing that's really important here is the agreement for the secure networking between the companies. That, obviously, you don't want to use hotel Wi-Fi for these kinds of meetings, that type of thing. But a lot of people do it because they don't think about it being a bad thing, but I wouldn't do it. So, having rules about secure networking between the companies, where you can network and where you shouldn't network. The as-needed visitations with the suppliers, either boots on the ground or virtually. The sharing of the information between the companies. And last but not least, the screenshots of information. I think this is one of these things that, people are just used to doing screenshots when they like to see something, and they just need to be aware that maybe that wouldn't be the right thing or prudent thing to do in many cases with sharing information or seeing information. Those things need to be ironed out as well with the interested party. So here's just a small list, but sitting down and figuring out who those interested parties are, and then what those things are that need to have agreement and approval with, need to be ironed out and then trained and documented. Now, we talked a little bit about this earlier, that defining a process for remote auditing. And I had suggested that J.P. Russell, he had put together an audit process that's in the Auditor's Handbook for certification through ASQ, in fact, that you can have a defined process for your internal audit. ISO 19011 also provides a guideline on how to put together a defined process for internal audit, and they offer the different aspects of that. Now, what we have said in the 19011, as well as setting out for your infrastructure in this training, these are the 5 areas that you really need to concentrate on to ensure that you have a good audit report at the end of the day. First of all is the technical check. You have to have a system where you do and conduct technical checks to ensure that remote location will be ready at the audit time for the audit. Then you proceed with your opening meeting. And this is a time where you ensure that the audit agenda is understood by everyone, that if there's any changes due to whatever's going on at that remote location, it can be made at that time and adjusted during the schedule. This is also a really good time to really get to know the different people and understand who they are, to gain a little bit of trust. Now, I've been doing virtual auditing for so long. It's my preferred method now than face-to-face. And it's because I feel like I meet the person better virtually, because they share more virtually than face-to-face. I'll tell you that right now. And also, you want to lay down some properties as far as, guidelines, when to return, from breaks, and when to share the camera, when to turn off the mics, all of those kind of things. And here's another opportunity to get clear on copying the screen, or doing a screen copy on during your audit. I never do it. I never ask because I don't do it. But anyway, if you are going to do it, you need to get permission. And the opening meeting would be a time to set that up. So this is all part of setting up your process. And then it's conducting the audit. And this includes both the sharing of documents, and never does the auditor just get access to a customer's or to a client's or remote location's computer systems and just go through that. I've been seeing this on LinkedIn, that some of these people trying, experimenting with virtual auditing, just rummaging through somebody's computer. That is not what's going on here. The person that owns the files has complete control of their files, and the auditor, as they should be standing there or sitting there asking questions about what they're observing. So setting that down as well. And then there's the preparing for the production line and ensuring that your visual review out there on the production line will be effective. That good Wi-Fi coverage and all of that is going to happen out there on that line. So those are two things during the audit that you need to ensure has been set up. And that has been done by the technical check prior to the audit and also the open meeting. And then after this, we have the closing meeting where we go over the findings with the auditor, with the client, and confirm the findings, and then submit the report to the remote location. This is the process that one should use when conducting an e-audit. This is the process that's spelled out. When we take a look at the auditor's capabilities, I mentioned earlier that many have been flying and traveling and not have had much experience working in virtual teams. This is a time for them to get that experience, because things do change in that virtual environment. So capabilities of an auditor doing virtual audit or remote auditing, e-auditing, is having virtual team experience, being able to work it. The communication in a virtual setting is different than in a face-to-face, and there's a lot of different dynamics that's going on. So auditors really need to understand what those dynamics are, because they have a responsibility to facilitate that. So understanding how learning styles change in the virtual environment is also a really important aspect that the auditor should learn and be part of their capability. The next thing is the collaborative program that they're using to do the desktop share and all of that, and selecting the right collaborative program too. That should be part of the technical aspect. There are some that are very well used and talked about, and they should be left with the grandparents and talking with the grandkids, like Skype, because they don't give a very clear review for documents, or if you're looking at a production line. So choosing the right collaborative program is important. But then also the auditor being able to maneuver through the audit, asking questions and being focused on the audit as auditors are, and also being able to change this technology from one user to another user, and sharing this different things and doing some minor adjustments when sound doesn't work. They need to be able to be comfortable with that and not get, what that gets you during the audit. So simple technology problem solving, like I said, the sound issues or it's mostly sound, or some visibility Wi-Fi issues. And then how to conduct that audit remotely. I've talked a little bit about some of the things that can come up with the previous slide, but it's different, and they have to feel comfortable with doing this virtually and being able to carry out that audit in a very good way. And then interviews and record reviews. So being able to review all of the records and find out where they're from, as well as the interviews with both people in the professional offices and people on the production floor. Okay, and there's the visual capture, so that is out there on the production floor, being able to see everything as you would if you're walking through the production itself. All right, so the last part to this is the technology to support the e-audit. One is the network security. Make sure that your network is secure and that your computer, equipment, and mobile devices, you've got the hardware that's going to work together as well as work with the collaborative programs. So you've got to get those to sync with the collaborative programs. Today, in today's world, things are working so much better than they did before, and there's just really no reason not to be doing e-audits because the technology has finally caught up with the e-auditing. And then there's the shared folders and access permissions. So instead of sending emails back and forth with their documents, get a shared Dropbox and have them put documents in there if you need to review a document before the audit. So the audit program risk assessment. Here we have the areas of risk. So the process, the potential failure mode for the audit not going through, the potential effects, the cause, and the impact on the audit program results. This needs to happen annually as far as looking at your audit program. How many of your site audits were canceled because of budget cuts or cancellations due to no flights to the area? The e-audits, how many will you not be able to see in a production line because of limited Wi-Fi? What about the remote desk audit? The process was not followed if you weren't able to look at the records or the records weren't available. And then attendance issues with communications. The audit doesn't run on time if people aren't there on time. But this is a good risk assessment to do on your audit program and just list the different processes that you have and methods you have and what those potential failure modes were and what happened in that previous year. Here's a listing of the references. There's a lot of articles from the online auditor, and they've written on this. So I encourage you to look at some of those articles because they support much of what many of the concepts that's been put into this presentation. And here's a writing from J.P. Russell. And what I did was I listed some of the auditor capabilities. I went into a little more detail as far as what they need to learn, so it could be a training plan for them. And here, if you want more detailed training, there's an online training class here that will teach you how to do e-audit. And then there's a handbook, this handbook right there from ASQ that will teach you as well how to do e-audits. And if you want me to train live, then I can do that as well. But that's what we have. I encourage you to get the necessary training, and then this will change your e-auditing world. All right. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Shauna Wilson, for that look at e-auditing. And that concludes this presentation.